This is lesson 2, and it's about fusion, or the claim that they can combine two hydrogen atoms into a helium atom, and that's their claim about how the sun works. It's all fantasy, and they gamble our entire world with the claim that that they can do what they say they can do, and they can't. And in 2012, on April 1st, the very first experiment with the very first machine that was capable of creating a crisis, an atomic fire on this planet, was used. It was not allowed to incinerate us, but it's still there, and it's still possible, and there are many more. So we need to understand what is or is not real. And in order to do that, you have to understand some things about how atoms actually work. So we have gone through, how a supernova explodes and functionally creates a black hole. But we'll go through that a little bit more. So here is the sun, and as it explodes, as debris comes through it, there is suns are spherical, so there's when they blow up, forces from all sides go to the center. So that means that for every action there is a reaction. So what is moving out is also pushing back. That's a given. That's a reality. So this is an action, and this is a reaction. And at the core, that reaction is now producing an action. So what we have is that dust is flying out. That will later be the mass of a proton in an atom. Very, very microscopic particles. And this is some of it, including dust particles, are being pushed back into the center or the core of the sun. What is an exploding sun? So now we know that those little dust particles are plugging up all the little bitty holes. Because that's you have a whole bunch of dust particles here. They're being pushed into the center core, and if it's a fairly spherical explosion, they have no place to go. And the consequence of that is that they condense. They turn around and they condense. And so all the little bitty dust particles plug up all the little bitty holes in what is being condensed at the core, and it becomes a black hole because there's no space left. But that doesn't actually stop it, because there's still energy. That's the mass part, but there's still energy being forced into it. And the energy being forced into it is basically becoming an extruded line. An extrusion that becomes a string, actually. And that takes over the actual center of the core, or the black hole that's left over. So what we know is that heat radiates. That's how we know heat exists. It's the movement. It creates space. Heat is space. Or heat creates space, and cold creates a condensing area. So we know that this is cold, but we also know that the frequency of heat is being pushed back into the core, and that means that it's being changed, where it's being extruded into the center area as a long, slow pulse. And pulsars are created because of that effect. And so the end result is that in order to accept the energy, or when the energy enters into this condensed area, this core, it begins to push back. So when it begins to push back, because it is energy and it has to do something. So when it pushes back, it actually tries to lift the black hole, or the center core, and when it does that, it finds it can't escape. because there's too many forces being pushed into it from the outside. And even though the initial explosion provides the condensation or the condensing of this into a black hole, even though the fact that they're still pushing out means that they're still pushing back in. So we have a continual line of force being pushed into the core, and that makes the core even more condensed, and that continues to, as long as it continues to accept that energy, it continues to have an effect on the space that's around it. And that, of course, becomes gravity, and then it becomes solar gravity. If it does not have enough energy, if it does not have enough force to continue to push backwards, then it becomes a neutron star, which is very, very dense. In other words, there's nothing happening in there, but it's very, very dense because all the space was removed. So the end result is that if it's big enough to accept that there's an action or a reaction entering in, it is a black hole, and when it gets big enough, it becomes a pulsar. And that means that the energy that comes into the center core tries to push out and cannot go anywhere, eventually creates enough force over time that it actually lifts the material of the black hole apart just a teeny little bit, even all of it, because energy is energy and it's going to do something. So it lifts it just a little bit, creates a crack or a fissure, and through that fissure, that energy that is in here is pushed out. So now we have a neutron. That's what a neutron is. So the neutron actually encounters the mass of the exploded dust particles of a sun from another star, or even this one, and it wraps that around that mass or that proton, and it creates chemicals, or it creates elements, or it creates the atom. So a pulsar is actually the recycler of the universe. So when it's big enough to force out, and we know that exists, it is the most extreme energy event in the universe that we know of. When that pulsar shoots out a line, it interacts with whatever gravity or whatever mass it finds, whatever dust particle it finds, and then the different elements are created by the different shapes of atom and how they are wrapped. If you have a very, very spherical small piece of dust, it'll wrap around, and probably the line of energy comes this way, and it's moving very, very, very fast, but much faster than the speed of light. So it hits this, and it breaks off what we know as electrons. Breaks those off. And it wraps around here because opposites attract. This is mass, a kinetic force of heat, and this is cold, a kinetic force of pull, or not a non-kinetic force of pull. And whatever misses, becomes lost negative energy in the universe. So sometimes an element is wrapped completely. Sometimes an element is wrapped only around the center. Sometimes an element is wrapped, in an hourglass shape. Sometimes an element is only wrapped at the bottom or the top or whatever it is, but the different configurations of how it is wrapped, which direction it's wrapped, and things like that determine what kind of element it's going to be. The bigger the mass, the heavier the atom will be. And there is a limit to how much mass can be contained at that kind of speed. And that's why there is a limit to elements. They only get so heavy, no matter what the university tells you. They only get so heavy because they cannot be contained within a spinning environment. And the spin is where the energy of an atom exists. So So here we have, why and how and if or when an atom creates its own speed, becomes involved with an environment that shapes its own space. Heat shapes its own space, and it keeps the neutron just a teeny little bit apart. And since like charges repel each other, a neutron on the outside of each and every atom repels the neutron on each and every side of the atom. And what we get is time is how we get energy out of the atom. And energy out of the atom refers to the electrons that go around that proton or that atom. And we bleed off the electrons, and they actually do the work that we are involved with. So that's a basic statement of how these things happen. And you can see, or you can at least begin to try to understand, that two atoms are not going to be joined together by people. Even at their 180 million degrees temperature or 500,000 psi pressure, as they claimed that was a lie. They continue the lie because they get paid for it. So they, protect their jobs and they continue the lie, like CERN does and so on. But what they're doing is gambling with our entire world, because when they try to recreate the same fire here as is on the sun, what they're trying to do is create an atomic fire. That's what the sun is, and that's what the sun does. It creates an atomic fire. And so we know that we cannot put out an atomic fire, or if you don't, you're stupid beyond belief, as is the university, because they want their fantasy to be real. And of course it's not. But nonetheless, they do it anyway, because fossil fuels are creating a problem. And that's because we use fossil fuels when we should not, or an overabundance of fossil fuels. And the reality of that is, given here, as is 1 gallon of gas creates 20 pounds of carbon dioxide. And that's because when we have a fire or a machine that uses oxygen, such as a motor or a power plant that delivers energy for electric cars, we don't actually remove the atom. We remove some of the energy of the atom. And it's when the energy is removed from the atom, from the oxygen, that it becomes a participant in life. So when the atom of oxygen has less energy, much less energy, it then becomes able to join with carbon and other things, and it becomes a basis of how biology begins or is created. So you have to understand that without the oxygen, we're going to die. And every gallon of gasoline takes the amount of air in the atmosphere that 30 people need to survive for a day. Every gallon of gas is roughly equivalent to how much you're going to breathe. 30 people are going to breathe in a day. So we have the equivalent of 5 billion gallons of gas used every year. And 5 billion times 30 is 150 billion people or lose their air to whoever drives the car, or ignites the air conditioning, or heats their home or whatever it is, because the end result is that it's oxygen for one or it's oxygen for the other. But either way, the earth does not make oxygen. Oxygen is an element, it's an atom, and we don't make atoms, we just use atoms. So when the earth stops releasing oxygen, then we stop breathing. So there are things that need to be done, and the thing that needs to be done is that humanity must change its ways. If we don't change our ways, we will lose everything. The planet, life and everything. And of course, the universities are completely destroying the balance of biology, completely destroying everything because they claim to be God and know what they don't know. They just fantasize. And there isn't anything on earth more vile, more obsessive, more arrogant than trying to bring the same fire here as is on the sun. Although claiming to be God and changing nature is certainly a very, very close second. All you're going to get is tragedy and chaos and crisis and the end of life on earth. Because that's what you chose. You let them do it. Why did you let them do it? They're just former classmates.